Heroes like Deku and Tanjiro are ringing in a new era of shonen protagonists who may have the spiky hair of their shonen forebears, but they bring something fresh to their stories, empathy, and vulnerability. It's hitting a little different, and that's what I'm here to talk about today. Simply put, shonen is and always has been for the boys. It's what the word means, literally. I'm not making like a assessment about it on the spot. That would be very weird. And though shonen enjoys tons of fans of all genders, it's designed to hold a mirror to its particular demographic, the boys and young men it's created for. So, if you notice that the boys of Shonen Jump are acting a little bit differently recently, probably has something to do with the shifting social values that they reflect. Deku and Tanjiro signal a wave of kinder, gentler shonen protagonists who still manage to kick a whole bunch of ass. These characters work because they're familiar while still bringing a fresh take on expressing emotion and vulnerability. They share a lot of traits with our favorite shonen heroes of the past. Like just about every shonen protagonist ever, Tanjiro and Deku are underdogs. Deku was born quirkless, and Tanjiro was a humble charcoal salesman before setting out to join the Demon Slayer Corps. If you line them up, they've got a lot in common with shonen giants like Luffy, Naruto, or Goku. All of them are on some sort of fated path. They're all outsiders in some way, and they all have spiky shonen hair, which is not a prerequisite necessarily, but it's the prevailing feature in most cases. Anyway, they are also all destined for greatness. So, look, I'm not trying to say contemporary shonen protagonists are reinventing the wheel or anything like that. Shonen will always be shonen, but characters like Deku and Tanjiro put a finer edge on a shonen protagonist's emotional experience. As much as I love every single character on my shonen list here, I have to admit that Luffy isn't the most sensitive guy in the world. Goku has never kissed his own wife and definitely doesn't know what emotional intelligence is. And to be honest, Naruto is just kind of a little so I guess at least until we get to Shippuden. But Tanjiro, as I said before, went from selling charcoal to gently assassinating demons in a little rainstorm that he created himself. So, you know, this is a different vibe. And it's not out of vengeance, but it's out of love for his sister Nezuko, who I've spoken about very passionately in the past. I want to dig more into that relationship in a minute, but for now, let me shift focus to Deku, who is also famous for his very deep feelings. Now, whether he's sobbing his eyes out or blushing after an encounter with Ochako, Deku couldn't hide what he is feeling if his life depended on it, and that is a big reason that I like him. Kind of done with stoic, seemingly unfeeling male protagonists. There's not really a lot you can do with them, especially when a lot of shonen stories focus on personal growth. And I'm not saying I don't love more reserved characters like Eraserhead or Genos. You know, you gotta have a straight man for comedic effect. There's nothing wrong with some texture, different types of characters, but it is nice that more stoic characters are making room for people who openly express their feelings. Beyond just being emotionally aware, both Deku and Tanjiro inhabit a rare role for a shonen lead. They're both caregivers. Deku only makes it into UA thanks to his display of true heroism in the face of a failing test score in the entrance exam. Even before that, it's clear that Deku is motivated by a selfless desire to help others, whether he has a quirk or not. Season 4 builds on a trait we first saw on display in Season 3 when he rescued Koda during the forest training camp arc. Deku has a soft spot for anyone who needs protecting, but especially kids. Season 4 draws out this dynamic in Deku's relationship with Eri. Not only does Deku rescue her from a fucked up situation, but he also builds a real bond with her. I mean, it's pretty rare to see a little shonen boy on the come up essentially adopt a child. If you count Mirio and Aizawa, that's 3 powerful dads dedicated to caring for Eri. And I can't talk about taking care of little kids without bringing up the whole Todoroki and Bakugo Babysitters Club thing, which is a thing that happened. I'm sure a lot of people hated it, but I thought it was pretty cool to watch. The fact that both Todoroki and Bakugo's arcs focus on them developing the ability to work through their emotions in a healthy way just highlights My Hero's focus on just kind of feeling your feelings. Caregiving is the ultimate tool for building empathy because it requires you to put the needs of others first, and at the end of the day, that is the lesson that Todoroki and Bakugo needed to learn. Tanjiro, on the other hand, doesn't really need a lesson in how to put others first. He kind of already does that, maybe to an unhealthy degree. Regardless, Tanjiro took his role as caregiver very seriously, long before he and Nezuko started hunting demons. Before his family was slaughtered by a demon, Tanjiro was seemingly their sole breadwinner, and it's obvious that his siblings look to him for love and guidance. When tragedy leaves only him and Nezuko alive, he dedicates himself completely to her care, no matter the risk to himself. I mean, kind of takes a lot of selflessness to carry a whole person in a little box. Tanjiro is also willing to accept and even embrace Nezuko in her new form. Yeah, his whole quest is to turn her human again, but he's never disgusted or repulsed by her demonic transformation. He still treats her with the same tenderness he did when she was a human. It's one thing to look out for people you care about, but it's another to extend that kindness to strangers or even enemies. Still, we see our guys Tanjiro and Deku Deku do both. I knew Tanjiro was above average nice the second he held hands with a disgusting fist-faced blob demon from Fujikasane Mountain. Even though the demon was responsible for killing so many of Urokodaki's students, Tanjiro still prayed for it to be spared the same fate in its next life. Pretty big of him, considering how gross and sadistic that dude was. Later, he offers the mother spider demon of the spider family a gentle and peaceful death. Loving that enemy isn't easy, and no one in My Hero Academia embodies that struggle better than Bakugo. But since there's been so much coverage of his bromance turned rivalry with Deku, I want to focus on someone else, Gentle Criminal. And the whole Shie Hasaikai fight was cool, and I can get down with all the plague masks and all that stuff. It feels very relevant to right now, but at the end of the day, I've spent way more time thinking about Deku's fight with Gentle Criminal. Kurt did a whole video about Gentle, so if you're into him, you can check him out. Gentle is the perfect villain for Deku to go up against because, frankly, he's not really evil. He's just kind of a nerd with a penchant for petty crime, which kind of sounds like me. But he has a strong moral code and he sticks to it just like Deku. As they fight, they begin to understand the values that guide each of them and they begin to develop a mutual respect. And while Deku still foils Gentle's plan to infiltrate the festival, when the pro heroes roll up, he sticks around to make sure they take it easy on him. Deku understands that for the most part, life isn't black and white, and people aren't simply heroes or villains, and it's important to be able to empathize with people you love, but also in certain cases with people who don't share your priorities or values. One of the reasons Gentle is so memorable is because he forces Deku to navigate the gray area between hero and villain, and if you've seen my video on Hero Society and Vigilantes, you'll know that I'm very excited to see the series dig deeper into that in the next season. As much as I'm leaning into the whole Deku and Tanjiro are good boys thing, I can't argue that they're alone in this. There are tons of contemporary shonen protagonists that embrace the trend, and some notable examples from classic shonen properties. Speaking as someone who's spent the last 20 years consuming as much Dragon Ball as possible, I could say that shonen series remain touchstones from childhood into adulthood. They're designed to help us carry through that journey and have a key role in shaping how we think we should behave. So it's pretty cool to see these characters doing simple stuff like being good to a child or showing up for the people who depend on you. They're little things, but they really shift the whole mood of a story. I gotta give props to Naruto here because he always traffics in empathy, and he probably, at least on some level, paved the way for the Dekus and Tanjiros that we're seeing today. His evolving relationship with Gaara is one of my favorite parts of the whole series, and it shows how things like empathy and good communication can help people lead healthier lives. Then there's the original shonen hero, Astro Boy. It's wild to think that a genre that at times has been dominated by hyper-masculine stories started with a sweet little, for some reason, half-naked robot boy. Like I said earlier, shonen tends to reflect the values of its time, and Astro Boy is a perfect example. The robot embodies post-World War II Japan grappling with the union of humanity and technology, and it's up to him to make complex moral judgments against both humans and robots. He participated in a robot civil rights movement that heavily referenced the fight for civil rights in America, so you could say he's the Karen of the 60s. He went to Vietnam, where he protected Vietnamese villagers from American troops. At the core of his story is Astro Boy's drive to be human and also to be good. I say also because being good, in the sense of always doing the right thing, is often at odds with what it means to be human. This is the dissonance that shonen heroes have been exploring ever since. I'll take this opportunity to suggest that you check out Pluto by Naoki Urasawa. It's a reimagining of the Astro Boy story that leans into the moral and ethical question around a robot's humanity. The manga is incredible, and there was some rumbling a while back about an anime adaptation coming out in 2020, but stuff happened since then. The road between Astro Boy and Tanjiro may seem like it'd be a short one, but it's actually a twisting road shaped by cultural forces like globalization, war, and of course, 80s action movies. If Astro Boy is at one end of the shonen hero spectrum, Kenshiro from Fist of the North Star is the other. Most of you know Kenshiro from this meme.
お前はもう死んでいる。NANI?!
But before that, he was the unequivocal king of shonen. Unlike the family-friendly heroes that came before him, Kenshiro was purely designed, a machine built for kicking ass. Violence was at the center of the story, with exploding bodies and cool catchphrases dominating the narrative. Unlike Astro Boy, which took an optimistic view of confusing times, Kenshiro exists in a war-torn, post-nuclear wasteland. He's stoic, he carries a heavy burden, and it's his stoicism that allows him to persevere. The message of Fist of the North Star is, bottle up your feelings, use them to fuel you, let them develop into a brain tumor in your late 30s. While Fist of the North Star is indisputably dope and remains a staple, it may not hold up as well for modern viewers. Much like the unchanging wasteland around him, Kenshiro is a static character. He never improves, he never really grows, he's never able to stray away from the path of vengeance. He just solemnly pushes forward, leaving violence in his wake. That's not to say that this kind of story is a bad one. It's basically the whole premise of John Wick, and it's not an anime, but it is one of the greatest action movies movies ever made, so I can get down with a classic tale of vengeance. But for a series as long-running as Fist of the North Star, you end up craving some change and evolution from the main character. If Kenshiro doesn't grow from his experience, what was the point of enduring all the pain? I'd argue that that's why Kenshiro-type heroes have fallen out of popularity in favor of strong and compassionate protagonists. Nonetheless, Fist of the North Star created a ripple effect in shonen with titles like Super Dr. K, Kinnikuman, Sakigake Otokojuku, and of course, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure adopting its hyper-masculine style. And as shonen has evolved and grown in popularity, we've seen plenty of characters that combine Kenshiro's raw power with Astro Boy's deep moral quandaries. But few heroes combine these influences as successfully as Goku. Dragon Ball combines the rounded, cutesy style of Astro Boy with the kung fu of Fist of the North Star and adds a touch of comedy which Toriyama honed in Dr. Slump. Goku represents the middle ground of the shonen spectrum. We get to see him grow from a child into an adult, and we get to see his whole training process, unlike Kenshiro, whose training is complete when we meet him. In short, we get to see Goku be vulnerable both physically in battle and emotionally, like when he watches his best friend die before turning into Super Saiyan for the first time, because that type of shit is kind of a prerequisite, unfortunately. Honestly, if I had to name someone who walks that line as well, if not better than Goku, I would say it's Vegeta, who's motivated entirely by his constant competition with Goku, and who we've now seen evolve from a genocidal maniac to a loving father who sacrifices himself for the greater good in the Majin Buu arc, if you remember that. That's a character arc that we wouldn't even tolerate in the real world unless you live in Argentina, I guess. In any case, both characters in their own ways embody the balance of unnecessarily jacked fighting machines and secretly emotional good dads, and I love them for it. As we see contemporary shonen skew more toward the Astro Boy side of things, we're meeting tons of new heroes who aren't afraid to share their emotions, but that doesn't mean they're all crying tears of joy, of course. One Punch Man explores another part of the emotional range, malaise. Saitama is basically a contemporary answer to Kenshiro. He believes becoming super strong will help him find happiness, so he does that, but then he becomes so strong that fighting villains is almost too easy. Still, he has no choice but to continue on. And while it's becoming more common to see shonen protagonists express fear, sadness, and doubt, there are fewer examples of shonen heroes dealing with more complicated emotional experiences like depression. It's gonna be hard to even talk about Hunter x Hunter without spoiling things, so for the fans out there, let me just say, Netero's fight against Meruem has to be one of the most powerful in all of anime. Not because these characters are so strong, but because their fight is really about a complex ethical choice, and there's no right answer. Overall, shonen heroes have it a lot harder nowadays. Most villains have some redeemable qualities rather than just being pure evil. So heroes are forced to make moral and ethical decisions whether or not they're really equipped for it. Eren from Attack on Titan has all the power of a Kenshiro, but has to wrestle with making decisions that affect the entire population. He may not always deal with the resulting emotions in the healthiest way, but he definitely works through them, sometimes by accidentally transforming into a Titan. But still, at least he's not always bottling things up. Shigeo from Mob Psycho, on the other hand, sort of has to bottle up his emotions, at least in the beginning. His powers are directly tied to his emotional state, so he worries that if he really gets in touch, he'll lose control, leading him to actively suppress his feelings. But as the series goes on, he develops new ways of using his powers that are completely centered on what he wants, and as a result, he's able to channel his emotions in a powerful and positive way. He's also down to spare his enemies, or at least forgive them, like when one of his first real foes, Dimple, is defeated and Mob takes him in, allowing the two to become really good friends. Of course, befriending your enemy is a classic shonen trope, but it's especially powerful in the context of a show that's so focused on emotional intelligence. Then, of course, there's one of the greatest shonen duos of all time, the Ulrich brothers from Full Metal Alchemist. Although FMA is a little bit older than the other properties I've listed, I think it's worth mentioning alongside these other kind and gentle shonen guys. I mean, the whole show focuses on healing emotional wounds from the past, not to mention the fact that Ed and Al are kinda precursors for Tanjiro and Nezuko. It's kind of a similar sibling dynamic, except instead of turning into a cute demon girl, Al turns into a somehow even cuter sentient suit of armor. I would like to respectfully abstain from arguing about which of these two is cuter, so maybe the age-appropriate people in the comments can argue there. Al is also a really interesting spin on shonen masculinity because of his form. Everyone the brothers encounter assume that Al is the powerful Full Metal Alchemist they've been hearing so much about, because of course he is fully made of metal, and he's terrifying. But then, of course, he opens his mouth and reveals he has the voice of a fourth grader. Of course, people are always shocked to learn that it's actually the skinny, tiny, blonde guy who is the real Full Metal Alchemist. Elric's aside, we're also finally seeing more shonen titles with non-male leads. The Promised Neverland stars Emma, a bright and incredibly competent orphan who's all about looking out for her friends. Act Age gave us Kei Yonagi, a young actress as preternaturally talented as any shonen protagonist who finds herself taking care of her younger siblings. There are more female mangaka than than ever in the pages of Shonen Jump, so here's hoping that we see an even wider range of heroes in Shonen to come. In fact, that seems like something we could do a whole video about. Maybe you would want to see that? Huh? Let us know. Nowadays, a lot of shonen is focused on the internal journey as much as the external. We'll always have muscle-bound, overpowered Jesus figures in lead roles, but it's nice to see how creators are playing with the dynamic between power and empathy. The creators of My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer aren't the first to explore this dynamic, but they're certainly leading a wave of new stories that acknowledge that emotional growth is as important as growing stronger. I'm Yudoye, you've been watching GetintheRobot, made in NYC because we can't move to Japan. If you like this video, subscribe, and follow us on social media and stuff.